Thanks everyone for being here. It's so nice to see your faces all in one group together. A true joy. Before we jump into things, I did want to do a quick round of getting to know each other. So my name is Miranda. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am situated in what is colonially known as Vancouver, but is actually the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I've been with Out in Schools since 2017, so like a hot minute now.
My name is Andy Holmes, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I've been with Out in Schools since 2016 as the volunteer coordinator for the Vancouver Queer Film Festival, and at the same time also as a facilitator. But I'd like to say that I actually go back all the way to when I was 14 years old in high school when I saw my first Out in Schools presentation.
My name is Mika. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I've been working for Out in Schools for 13 months.
My name is Marielle, and I use they, them, and theirs pronouns. I've been with Out in Schools now for, I believe, a little over a year and a half.
My name is Jackson Wei Cong-jie. I go by he, she, and they, which means you can call me he, you can call me she, you can call me they. It doesn't matter, just as long as you call me. I started with Out in Schools earlier this year, so it'll be a year in the spring.
My name is Avery. My pronouns are they, them, and I've been with Out in Schools for 2.5 years, most of those years as a facilitator, and I am now the program coordinator.
How did you get involved with Out in Schools, and what made you want to be a facilitator with us?
I got involved with Out in Schools because when I was 14 and saw them present at my high school, I was very moved because I wasn't out at the time. I do this work because I recognized how important it was when I was in high school to see queerness talked about in a very positive way, to have representation that brought justice to our lives. And I'm very proud of the work that Out in Schools does to address, many forms of systemic inequalities.
I was working at Camp Out 2 years ago, and I just was like, whoa, all these people are the same age as me and have like really cool jobs. And I was like, whoa, like what am I doing? Like I'm a gay person and I just like do straight people jobs. I applied kind of like, oh, whatever, if it happens, it happened. And then it totally did happen. And I was like, wow, if I put myself out there, things that I feel like I can achieve can come true.
I love that, boring straight people jobs. I do a lot of those still. Miranda was my first friend in this city and had been working Out in Schools. And one day I got a text from her just saying like, you do facilitation, right? And I was like, yeah, I do. A lot of it, but I hadn't done it for a while because I was doing boring straight people jobs, and I wanted to do something really meaningful that actually utilized my skills and my personal experiences. The rest is history.
In 2018, I got an opportunity to connect with Out in Schools and Out on Screen for the first time through the Troublemakers program. It was like a partnership between Love Intersections, Real Youth, and Out on Screen, where they paired us emerging filmmakers with these troublemakers, elders. I was like really excited to hear that Out in Schools was a branch that existed. I grew up in pretty conservative, what's now known as Calgary. Growing up, I remember I was like hiding out at the library, reading books hidden inside of other books to get the sex education that I needed. After witnessing my first Out in Schools presentation, I was just really excited that the future generations of BC are getting this quality of education.
Some of y'all have been working here for a really long time. Some of you are fresh faces. And I'm curious if there's a standout moment for you in terms of like a highlight of your Out in Schools career, like a moment that really stands out for you.
One of my like really early presentations with you, Miranda, we presented for the GSA, and then they had a drag performance that they put on after our presentation. I was just personally getting into drag at the time, and here I was watching these very, very young teenagers exploring gender expression and music and dress up in the most liberated way. And my jaw was just on the floor the entire time.
They were great. It was awesome. It was so phenomenal. And it really, for me, I remember feeling a lot of gratitude to be like, wow, young people have it so great when it comes to the basic knowledge. And we're able to have these conversations and these learning lessons with them that I didn't really fully understand until well into my 20s.
Can I share one more?
Mhm.
We were just a little bit tight on time for a presentation with some really, really minis. So we had to skip a couple things, including one of our videos on transness with like a really young character. I think we kind of skipped over it and maybe mentioned that we skipped over it. At the minis' lunch break, there were two tiny little humans that came back into the auditorium and they were like, we actually want to see that video. I think these children were like 6 or 7 years old, and they stayed and the two of them watched the video through their lunch break and asked us a lot of questions about gender, and it was amazing.
That was one of my first presentations that I came. I was shadowing Marielle and Miranda as well. And then I remember that Marielle was like, these little kids wanted to watch the video. I will share my memory. I went on tour with Miranda. We went to Duncan. On the first day, we were presenting to a Simon Fraser Elementary School, and it was like a bunch of fourth graders or something. And then I was talking about intersex. Like this fourth grader put up his hand and we called on him, and he was like, oh, it seems like unconsensual intersex surgeries are really relatable to residential schools. And I was like, are you in the fourth grade and you just said this to me? Like, can you give the presentation, please? Like, so that blew my mind and reinforced the idea that kids are so smart and like so aware of understanding really challenging concepts. And then later we went to Duncan. It was like kind of a hard presentation, like the speakers weren't working that well. But then this like little trans boy came up to us afterwards, like bawling his eyes out, and was just like, it's so nice to see representation. Like, and I was like, oh my God, little baby, like I'm here for you. And that just made like all of the horrible speakerness and like totally worth it, because we just connected with like this one little boy who really needed to hear that he's valid and his experience is valid.
Mika talking about how one of your first times shadowing Miranda and Marielle, one of my first times was shadowing you, Mika, and Miranda. Yeah, I love Out in Schools because of its staff. You know, I'm pretty new to the program, so I haven't had the opportunity to present as much yet. But even one of the first times that I got to stand up there with my shaky legs and share a little bit, I remember a young person coming up to me afterwards and just looking so excited and like reaching out their hand and like wanting to shake mine and thanking me. And I felt like I made a small difference.
An unforgettable moment for me with Out in Schools was a presentation, I believe, in Abbotsford to a group of parents in the evening. And there was a man who came up to me after the presentation and he said to me, my kid just came out as trans. What do I do? It was a very raw moment because this seemed like someone who was only there because of that experience of his own kid coming out as trans. And he had a genuine curiosity of how to actually better himself as a parent. I don't exactly remember what I said. It was along the lines of, respect, your kid and, they're who they are. And I thanked him for going to the presentation. And it reminds me that the work that we do with Out in Schools is so important because we're really bridging across different communities of people who might not understand queer issues. And I think that it actually saves lives.
In the work that we do, a lot of it is just being in the room or being in the Zoom room and showing young people and educators and parents opportunities and examples of different ways of being. But the other part that we do is we also bring films into those spaces as well. Do you see yourself represented in media? And if so, how? And if not, what's missing?
I can share that I don't often see myself represented in films. I don't think a lot of queer people do, and that's one of the main reasons why the work that we do with Out in Schools is so important, especially for younger audiences, because they need to be able to see themselves reflected in ways that allow them to envision a successful, happy future. Something that we often ask is, how would your story change the world? And I think we're inviting people to see themselves as making their own future.
Even when there is something to identify with, it's not in our entirety. One of the times I remember being like, oh my God, this feels so familiar, was when I started watching the show Transparent. The lead character, who is trans, is played by a cis man. But I remember seeing that family and the way that they experienced their Jewishness as so intimate and close to what I have seen. Even when there's a little bit of representation, it's not always a whole good thing.
You know, growing up in Calgary, I was the only person of color in my entire kindergarten class. I was really surrounded by a lot of white folks and folks that didn't really understand cultures outside of what they'd known. And so I kind of quickly had to learn to hide who I was. For me, it was like Mulan. Oh, like my culture is worthy of worldwide attention and worthy of celebration, and it's beautiful. And to also feel the same way when I see queer films. Who I am is also worthy of worldwide attention. Part of the work that Out in Schools is doing is sharing with these kids that it's okay to be different. It's okay to like see people but not fully understand them, not totally like be the same as them, but it's inherently still beautiful and they're worthy of love and attention.
We have questions for each of you now. First up is you, Mika. So you've been doing quite a bit of presenting with us, so you've really gotten the hang of presenting digitally through Zoom. What is your favorite part about delivering presentations digitally?
My favorite part about presenting digitally is it seems like there's way more involvement on the youth's end. The social justice 12 class that we presented to, where each student had their own computer and they really were engaged like so much in the chat. I think like a quarter of the class or half the class like used they pronouns, and then the they thems like we're going to town on the plus signs, like agreeing on everything we said. That was really cool to see that those youth felt really comfortable to engage with us over a platform that seemed to more meet their needs of communication. Instead of just being like, put up your hands if you know what intersex means, we could just be like, yo, like put a plus sign in the thing. It was like interesting the pace of that conversation, and we got to see that they knew a lot of things that we were saying, so we could go more in detail through having like a more interpersonal communication via chat. But on the other side of that, there's classes that just are cricket. So it's like a little bit more challenging and more asking rhetorical questions, but I hope that they still get to receive a lot more information in like the comfort of their space behind the screen, instead of being like, oh, I'm a queer person, everyone knows I'm queer, like stuff like that. They can just like be chilling in their room listening.
Next up, I have a question for you, Jackson. You've been busy with so many other really great things in the community, and you haven't yet facilitated with us over Zoom. What are you looking forward to?
I'm excited to connect with youth in a different way. I like the use of the chat box so much more. I think a lot of the time in presentations, you know, youth are expected to sit still and just listen, and it's harder to engage in an active way. Whereas if you are able to use the chat box, it's actually really affirming to see like tons of plus signs and tons of engagement.
Andy, we are so blessed to have you with us for as long as we have. Because you've been with us for so long and you even had that experience of receiving a presentation, have you noticed a shift in the knowledge of the folks that we present to?
That's such a great question. Yeah, so I mean, I think the very first Out in Schools presentation I saw must have been in 2010 or 2011. So it's been almost a decade. I think the knowledge has shifted. What I'm really proud of Out in Schools for doing is broadening its expansiveness in challenging social justice inequalities, specifically focusing on issues of intersectionality. Presentations 10 years ago didn't talk as much about Indigenous rights, racial inequalities, talking about trans and non-binary issues, and people are now wanting to learn more about how queerness intersects in its capacities with other forms of social inequalities. And I think that's the future of queer work.
Marielle, it's so fabulous to hear you speak because there's so much passion that you bring. With that passion, I'm wondering what your favorite part of the presentation is your favorite to deliver.
Thanks for that question. Also, thanks for the compliment. My favorite is to talk about gender expression, but also just expression. Students, especially the older ones, when they're learning those things, it's almost intimidating that there are so many terms to learn and so many potentially ways to mess up. And when we talk about gender expression, we give people the permission to not know. You can't know someone's assigned sex or gender identity or attraction based on their expression. Expression is something else. It's like a way that we're allowed to give ourselves space in this world and express our beauty. And also because sometimes it's really fun to dress up for Out in Schools presentations. So you get to reference your own expression. You get to be like, I'm wearing green lipstick, but that's not an inherently feminine thing to do. Blah, blah, blah.
Thank you all so much. It's really great to hear from each of you because you all bring so much to the team. And we know that behind every team and behind every human is what got them there. And I'm wondering, what are some of the supports that you've had?
I would say gay elders and gay community. My friend, my gay uncle Tim came to my mind. He wanted to change his name for a long time. I feel like through the process of our friendship, where we're both just like do gay farming and talk about gay stuff all the time, that he felt really comfortable in changing his name as well to Serendipity Uprising. And I was like, that's the sickest old gay name. Thank you for being a 62-year-old AMAB genderqueer person who just like demanded that your whole community call you Serendipity Uprising. So that just inspires me so much that I can be myself. My identity is fluid. I can change my identity at any time in my life and it'll be valid. I feel that I can ask for those things because people in my community ask me for those things and expect me to respect them. So it's just the cycle of loving each other is extremely important.
I can share that. Honestly, one of the earliest, biggest supporters was Out in Schools for me. When I was in high school and I wasn't out to anyone as a 14-year-old, it was really, really liberating to see Out in Schools as a, invited group presenting, supported by my high school to talk about queer issues. I also agree that queer elders are so important, and whether or not they use the word queer to describe themselves, it speaks to a history of not belonging, of discrimination. I echo this idea of the cycle of love, that it invites us to continuously try to do work to uplift communities. So thank you to everyone who does that work, and to the Directors Guild for supporting Out in Schools to continue that cycle for new generations of youth.
If you could pick one tangible thing, what one message would you hope to impart to the young people you work with Out in Schools?
I think the one thing that encompasses so much of what we talk about and includes everyone is that no one person is broken in any way or wrong in any way.
You're enough. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, and your identities are valid.
You're beautiful. Just follow your heart and keep doing you.
If you're queer, we understand and we love you. If you're not, I guarantee you will one day meet people who are, and we all have to learn how to respect each other.
The thing that I hope that people get, if nothing else, is recognizing that movies can be incredibly life-changing. These enjoyable experiences, watching things on film, can actually be really good learning tools. And I hope that they're able to explore other identities that are similar to theirs, follow those stories through the films and the movies and the books that you want to see, to continue to learn through that avenue.
The last question I have for you, I want you to dream big. We're in a really strange time right now where our presentations look very different, our lives look very different. What do you think could be next for our program? What direction do you want to see us going?
I would just love to do something that's not an hour and a half with students, because that never feels like enough time. Like, if I could dream as big as I wanted, what if Out in Schools just had like a weekly or monthly class in schools, like building relationships with the same students?
Gay Hogwarts. Come on. I think it would be really cool to have a 2-week or some long amount of time program where we can connect like queer filmmakers with upcoming queer wannabe filmmakers and like have a mentorship program. I think that'd be awesome. Gay Hogwarts.
I'd like to see, for a change, actually, Out in Schools shows films. I think it'd be really cool if one day someone does a documentary on Out in Schools. Out in Schools is to my knowledge, one of the first programs of anywhere in the world as a group that's done this really important queer educational work, a documentary that shows its development, and hopefully that inspires other places in the world to take up similar work.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for spending some time with us to be able to explain from your point of view, because honestly, y'all are the people who make this program like so unique and so special.
Thanks so much.
Thank